Hello, how you doing? It's me, it's Alan. Welcome to this week's episode of The Sounding Board, episode 5. Yes, that's right. I've made it to 5 episodes in. The last episode we had was all about Bedrock Generative AI. And so this week we're going to be talking about Generative AI again in a very special fireside chat. But before we start off introducing our guest today, how do you get involved? Don't forget you've got the little QR code over here. That's right. Click on that QR code, scan it. If QR codes aren't your thing, then you can also just click on the link down below just here as well. That takes you to a form. You can fill out your details, your question, what it is you want to talk about. Maybe you want to come on the show as well and start to get involved as well. So either way, get involved, QR code or link down below. Now, today we've got 2 special guests, not 1, 2. One of them is a boomerang to the sounding board, Mr. Bojan Zivic, and the other guy is a colleague of his as well. But the best thing about these 2 guys is these are the geekiest nerds you'll ever know. They basically bleed orange, both community builders and ambassadors. There we go. Got them on the screen.
Woo!
What an introduction, right?
Yeah.
Couldn't have asked for a better one.
Yeah. I'm sorry, were there other people attending this? Because, yeah.
So just quickly from today's topic, today's topic is going to be a fireside chat. We're just going to sit down and talk about Gen AI, but just give us a quick introduction as to what you do, who you are. Start off with Bojan first and then random Matthew.
Sure. Hey, everyone. You've seen me before, Bojan Zivic. I'm a serverless enjoyer, a CDK lover. You can probably see that here. But I'm also a AWS ambassador and a community builder, and happen to work with Matt as well at Mental Group as a principal consultant. So if it's serverless containers or something that I've been playing way too much with the last year and a half or so, Gen AI, I'm your guy.
Yeah. And I'm Matthew Merriel, again, principal consultant, Mantel Group, community builder, golden jacket holder, ambassador. I do bleed orange, I think, at this point. Into robotics and that a bit at the moment. But yeah, been living the whole Bedrock and Q thing for the last, Bedrock coming up on 9 months now. 12 if you count the beta.
I'm a little bit concerned as well with the decapitated R2D2. Is there a story behind that?
R2D2 is making his public premiere appearance in August at the AWS Builder Studio at the Maker After Dark meetup. A little bit of a plug for that. But he needs some last-minute love and attention as far as his RoboMaker integration. So that's why his brain's kind of strewn all over the back desk at the moment. That's why his brain...
Love it. I love somebody with a good side project, somebody with something that they're passionate about as well. That means that that passion spills into everything else they do then as well. So thank you for sharing.
It has been a fun project. It is also a lot bigger project than I anticipated. AWS suggested last year, why don't you start with a smaller robot with fewer moving parts and less requirement for integration? And I went, nah, how hard can 3D printing an R2D2 be? The answer is it's not hard, it's just very labor intensive.
Is that the 3D printer behind you as well?
Yes, that's the Bamboo Carbon X1 or X1 Carbon. So yes, my colleagues and project members are used to it running off in the background during meetings all day.
I can contest to that, but it's pretty silent, won't lie. Usually it's something exciting. Nobody complains. They're like, all right, what are you printing now?
As far as 3D printers are concerned, not obviously this isn't a 3D printing channel, but as far as 3D printers go, I will say that is a very quiet printer. You can quite happily, sit on meetings and all of that without it making too much noise in the background. But as with anything, it's far from silent. It's far from silent.
Awesome. Cool. So what I wanted to do today is put three like-minded individuals into a room and lock them in there for an hour and to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of generative AI. So the 3 of us all work in consultancy partners where we see a lot of this, a lot of the requests coming through for proof of concepts of Gen AI, maybe even projects of productization as well. But there's a lot of hype around it at the moment, which a lot of people say .com boom was a hype, and crypto was the hype. Why is there so much hype around generative AI right now?
There's a use case. Look, it isn't just these funny money tokens that underlying some sort of technology that will replace the world, that people are basically saying will replace all current currency, and basically wink wink nudge nudge, it's not crypto. Gen AI has basically become this thing where you can go quickly to a very usable, very legible app that has some sort of use case relatively quickly. It isn't something that had sprung up overnight and basically just created a new section of the AI ML industry without cause, because it definitely has. And the barrier of entry to creating anything Gen AI, because everybody's kind of jumped on board of it, has become really low. Like, I'll give you an example with AWS. They've got something called Party Rock. You tell a Gen AI what sort of Gen AI you want to create, and it can help you get there. And I think because of that, it's usable. Everybody's jumping on board, like especially for stuff like search and like databases.
Absolutely agreed. Like, all you need to, like, the time to market now with a lot of these, particularly the smaller, more targeted use cases, right? Bojan mentioned search, right? Like, enterprise search is a phenomenal use case for generative AI. And it is super easy with AWS and your other hyperscale providers having spent the last few years pushing the big data, the get everything up in the cloud, the get it in S3 buckets, storage is cheap, keep everything. It is now super easy to hook an LLM into an S3 bucket or even some form of like larger scale data lake, and start scraping that and really surfacing up a lot of value in a very, very quick turnaround. Like, I partook in a hackathon at AWS the other week, right? And all the teams were able to build from start to finish a enterprise search chatbot scraping data in a matter of hours. So when you can do that, like when you can do a proof of concept on this in under a day, it gives you then a lot of flexibility to then add on all the other, the special source, which we can talk about later. But it becomes a very tangible thing, and that opens up the possibility for, I'd like some of that, because just about every application search feature, and I'm not looking at anybody in particular, Confluence, sucks.
Yeah,
but the question is, does the search need to be a chatbot? Could we not just accept standard search?
Well, look, think about it like this. It isn't search in a traditional sense anymore. It's now also gone to the point where we're doing search in using vectoring. We're using search using, I would say, probably a more personalized experience to get you the result that you want. Previously, it was like, I'm going to help you complete this based upon words. When you put in a generative AI that's been taught to have some sort of understanding of what you're actually searching for, you can get a better idea of what the results are by getting a response back that also is inclusive of reference points. So usually, like, if I Google search, I look at the first page of Google. Rarely do I go to the second, third, fourth, or let alone 53rd, right? A generative AI response may be, all right, so based upon what you want, this is what I think it is based upon these resources. So you can get to the answer quicker.
Yeah. Because a lot of the time, I don't know what it is that I'm looking for. And a prime example would that be, like, internally, right? I wanted to double check something that I was working on, and how it aligned to our internal security policy, right? I don't know exactly what our security policy is called. Is it an ISM? Is it a information security manual? Is it a policy? Anything like that? But I know, like, I want to know what the policy is regarding the use of external services, third-party services. Typing that into a modern day search box isn't particularly conducive. Being able to type that into a chatbot and be able to iterate, and as Bojan said again, have the reference, like, based on this material over here, means I can not know exactly what it is that I'm looking for, but still be able to get what I need within the context that I'm doing it. Which is the nice bit.
And I do agree that the chat experience makes it more inclusive and makes people feel more comfortable as well about using these services. Whereas a lot of people feel awkward about Googling, right? How many people try and Google and they're Googling Yoda chat, you know? Whereas with a chatbot, at least they can have this more interactive facility.
More natural, flowing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even Google's been, even before the Gen AI stuff, Google's been giving you sort of responses when you're putting in the Yoda sort of talk, or when you're writing in German. Sorry, when you're writing like a German but you're using English, where effectively I can type in, for example, I don't know, AWS Azure best functions of serverless, right? And one of the first things you see immediately is, what are the best functions in cloud? Like all these random little questions before you even get to the links, which then lead you to something potentially that may get you to the answer. But it's not taught. It's just basically hoping that it's leading you to the right place, unlike Gen AI, which is a little bit more summarized, generative.
So you mentioned you've been doing some AWS hackathons. What sort of products are being utilized at the moment out of these hackathons? What's feeling popular? What's not?
The two big ones in the AWS space, particularly when it comes to hackathons, are Q Business and Bedrock by far. Obviously, you can do a lot more detailed work, a lot more, grassroots stuff if you crack open a SageMaker, Canvas, and start doing things with the raw infrastructure. There's probably a call out there for something about the AWS Innovation Fund that they're doing at the moment around Gen AI startups. But Bedrock and Q are the two by far. Q Business is a phenomenal tool. That's the one I used during. That's the one we used during the hackathon. It is point and click for I want to scrape this S3 bucket with this IAM policy, and I want be able to get me this type of result. And for your what I would sort of call your base level or enterprise search type use cases, you're talking hours, like minutes to hours to get something sort of up and running. It has just come out of their I don't know what you'd call it, their early adopter pricing, I guess you'd call it. They were being very nice and not charging for users until the 1st of July. Obviously, we're a little bit past that now, so it can get a little pricey. I think it's like $20 a user per month. So if you're a large-scale organization with hundreds or thousands of users, that's not an insignificant price to pay. But it does. Wow, I was going to say remove the undifferentiated heavy lifting, but I don't want to be bought and paid for that hard. It does make things very easy. Obviously, you lose a lot of the flexibility that you get with some of your other offerings, but they offer integration into like custom plugins, so you can give it an open API endpoint and have sort of like an agent experience and have it go and fetch data from a third-party service. So I've just done one internally at Mantel Group where we can now go and look up, it hooks into our ERP in order to look up resource availability for when we're doing resource planning and those sorts of things. Who do we have available 2 weeks from now with RDS, like Microsoft SQL RDS skills? That's something that verbally I can say pretty easily, but going into the tool and searching and adding filters and all of that it's not hard, it's just cumbersome, right? And simply typing that into a chatbot is a lot quicker, a lot easier. Now, extend that one step further and hook that up to your microphone so that you can speech to text and have a voice-driven chatbot. And whereas really living in La La Land, but again, that took me a day to build the custom plugin. It's just an open API endpoint into a Lambda function, right? Like not particularly complicated there by any stretch of the imagination.
But one of the biggest problems that we're going to come up to, I can see that Bojan's quite literally on the edge of his seat for this next point, I think, is why are we all not doing it? What is stopping us right now?
So I just want to kind of reflect on Amazon's side, why we're all not doing it, right? Amazon's side, Matt, you said is a little bit pricey. Call it what you want. But right now, the only way to do LLMs, it just, even if you consider AI for a second, it's expensive as hell. We can thank, Mr. and Mrs. NVIDIA, the graphic card manufacturers for all of that, mainly NVIDIA. Because even underneath the hood, Amazon Q's either using Amazon's own training chips, I believe they're actually, funnily enough, called Trainium, to actually run the models if you're using the specific ones they've built. I think Titan is theirs. Otherwise, if you're using anything like Sonnet-based from Claude Anthropic, or if you're using OpenMama or any of the other ones from Meta, you're going to be using a lot of expensive GPU compute. And the reason why not everybody's on it right now is GPU compute is incredibly expensive. If you really want to have a mild panic attack, just go to the AWS calculator right now and just look up how much H100, or was it an A100? Can't remember those lines altogether. An instance from AWS costs to run 24/7 for a month. Now, imagine that at a scale where a company wants to make money. So we're talking potentially, 20, 30, 40, hundreds, right? You quickly learn that you can experience death by infrastructure very quickly. So we're dependent on these third-party services that simulate a SaaS-like experience, kind of like what Amazon Q does, to get us there. What is wonderful, though, as a bit of a solution to that, is that we're in the very early days. And we're already starting to see people move away from what graphic cards are right now, which is basically, I would say, using the most powerful raw force to do what an LLM can do, into more specialized hardware where its only job is to work on a an LLM-based algorithm. Going back to the days of using FPGUs, if you remember what they were, right? And people still use them to today. Specialized hardware, and that effectively is more power efficient and cheaper.
Cool. There's still the issue, though, of availability across regions, which, I've got customers in Sydney like, why we're not getting this? When do we get access? Through testing, like some customers, including myself as well, have had to relocate their IAM identity center as well, configuration. So it's a bit of complexity there as well. So what's the driver behind availability, do we think?
Well, it's twofold. The first is the supply and demand curve. The traditional data center has got a bit of revitalization, as well as the desktops, like the workstation market has blown up, where people are just running 4 or 5 graphic cards at home in a giant tower to basically do the LLM builds and works, training models to get them where they need to go, which may effectively be, in some ways, for some organizations, because obviously with fanciful tax, you can write a lot of those things off, cheaper than running the cloud. So those planned 140, 150,000 on, 6, 7 cards. But with that demand, you now have the big players such as AWS, Azure, and Google, who have to also contend for that same exact supply. And right now, unfortunately, we're only tapping one well, which is NVIDIA. There are other competitors out there. AMD make great server GPUs for that workloads. However, their support globally isn't there. So when you have people building models that work well with CUDA, NVIDIA in particular, you'll find that if you're tapping one source, sometimes the well may run not quite dry, but you may have to dig a little deeper, or you have to wait a little longer to get there.
Are NVIDIA opening the door now for more competition?
Yes and no. So NVIDIA, for starters, caused a spike in demand because for entry was easy. But the overall execution is that they've created this great developer community behind it, building another LLM using those using the CUDA framework. It's really hard to compete against. So you have now this giant who's worth at one stage the most valuable company in the world, who's pushing for that developer community, but not being so open themselves.
Yeah, and I think it would be good to see further competition come in. How quick can they ramp up to be compatible, not compatible. What's the word? Comparable. That was the word I was looking for. But then as we see more vendors come into the market as well, maybe we see more accessibility of bringing GPU into other services, serverless services.
That's not a dig. That's not.
Give me Lambda and give me GPUs on Lambda, or give me death. That's the best way to put it.
So this is what happens when you get a bunch of community builders all on the call at the same time, right? Like we all have the same axes to grind. But going back to your previous point, I say it also is compatibility, because for years we've been told as hyperscale cloud customers that under the shared responsibility model, and this isn't just AWS, this is any of the hyperscales, we shouldn't have to worry about the hardware, right? That's for the cloud vendor to worry about. But if we think about it logically, if another competitor comes into the hardware space, right, the cloud vendor, and again, doesn't matter if it's AWS, Microsoft, Google, they're not going to be able to buy into that unless it is compatible with their existing NVIDIA fleet, because they're not going to want to have to manage two different sets of infrastructure. We all know how managing disparate infrastructure is a pain in the butt. That's why we all moved our stuff to the cloud in the first place, right?
Yep.
It's going to be very hard for any of them to adopt other bits. Now, we think about it from a supply chain management perspective, and it would absolutely, we all know it's going to be in their best interest to split the risk across multiple vendors, because being beholden to NVIDIA alone is not a great position for anybody to be in, but as unfortunately as an industry right now we are. But that's my concern is we, as Bojan said, all right, we haven't quite tapped the well, but the well is running pretty close to empty, and will be for the foreseeable future, because this whole AI thing, as Mike Chambers said in the last episode, it's not going anywhere, right? Like, we're just at the beginning of this, and if we've got constraints now, this is going to be a thing for years, and it may not quite be hitting, the consumer market right now particularly bad, but it's not a great position to be in. But it's the flip side of this is we are now having to worry about these sorts of hardware problems as cloud customers, right? We alluded to before about the disparity, but the disparate nature of the different regions, and which models, which Bedrock models can we get in Sydney versus which models can we get in other regions. We don't have Q Business in Sydney yet, right? Q Business, as I said before, it is a fantastic product, but at the moment, you've got to ship all your data overseas in order to be able to use it. Well, we're all located in Australia. Australia's got some pretty stringent, data sovereignty requirements for a lot of organizations. Not to mention the fact that shipping data into another region is not exactly a particularly price comfortable position to be in either. So these are all just compounding issues that boil back to the why aren't we all doing it? Well, one, it's expensive. Two, it's not as available as we'd like it to be. Three, there are still technical hurdles that we're needing to overcome. We all want it. Like customers, I'm almost having the Gen AI conversation every day with customers in some way, shape, or form, be it we want, Q developer to make our developers happier, or a chatbot or a tool or something. But until Melbourne and Sydney get more capacity, get more infrastructure, it's just going to build up that demand. And holy smokes, when that stuff actually comes and the floodgates open, I think we're all going to be very, very busy.
Mind you, this isn't something new. So
no, it's not.
Tell a little story about I was at a Kubernetes conference, and I know it says serverless enjoyer, but I do also enjoy the odd container orchestration platform, where a company called Nearmap, who does geospatial engineering, presented themselves. And they showed off their kit and what they used. And they showed that to get the actual GPU compute that they needed for the processing that they worked on. They went across, I think it was 3 different AWS regions to go and get more GPU compute. So GPU compute has always been something that's been in high demand. Now, if you imagine if you've got a high demand product that in a very short period of time explodes in demand, you then struggle to compete. We come back to the model of how do we effectively manage it, and you don't. But what has to change and what is changing is the concept that there is no one AI to rule them all. So a guy called Roman Volovsky, might have ruined that saying that last name. He was an AI security researcher. According to him, he basically said, as we're getting to the point where we're getting super specialized models, they'll be better than what a single individual can be at one specific thing. Coding, one of them we're seeing a lot of now. It could be, for example, creating recipes. Another one could be a super specialized generative model towards car repair. So you'll have like the perfect dictionary for every single part, every single component. This AGI component, which is something we'll probably touch on at a later point, which is the general intelligence side. Yet we're not even close. Right now, it's just basically agents and predictive ways in giving you answers using a hell load of hardware.
Mm. So coming back to the customer experience and the builder experience, then we touched briefly on the different services and the workshops and hackathons that we've done. One of the things that makes these hackathons and the proof of concepts so accessible is the way we're being presented with some of these services. So I'm just going to put something on the screen. I believe you two have seen this before.
Yep.
Yeah, we've seen it, I think, 3 times a week at the moment. So for those that haven't seen it yet, I don't think you can see my mouse, my pointer thing, sorry. One of the things, what this is illustrating is the stack of services that AWS offer for machine learning. So the bottom layer is all of the individual components that go to make, say, a model, a custom service, something that's quite bespoke, becomes very complex and a lot of operational overhead to build something in that layer. But people do. SageMaker's in there as well. The middle layer, which is what's making builders' life very easy right now, is Bedrock. Effectively, a simple API to then start to enable you to be building in and around machine learning, but make custom applications. And it's so easy. It's almost a single line now to call Bedrock and get something useful out of it instead. But then at the top, and this is where my point is coming up. At the top, we have consumerized services, software as a service, Amazon Q for business. Q is now in QuickSight, Q for Amazon Connect. Do we need more of these consumer level applications to make it easier?
I mean, it depends who you're aiming it towards. Builders and what do you call it, solutions architects, and people alike, not so much. Those are the ones who probably have more time and potentially even work time to dig through documentation and look at how they can build on their own. And I think they probably fall more towards that Bedrock side. But the general population, absolutely. One to really focus on from my side is Amazon Code Whisperer, which has now been renamed to Amazon Q for developers, right? Mm-hmm. It's, I would say, the only product at the moment that has enough of a big company behind it. It's competing with GitHub Copilot, which is a great co-pair programmer for development. I use and go back and forth between both for content to write about and also the content to actually prepare about, but their real world use case is nuts. I don't have to write test cases. There's your first one. It can help me get to the point. I say, this is my software. Help me write a test case, and it can get me 70% of the way there. To create more, I think is, I would say, a solution looking for a problem. Because you can inject AI into almost anything and say you've created the next best thing, but have you really solved anything? Not really.
No, got to work backwards from the the customer pain point, the customer requirement, and then see what comes out of the woodwork. So, where are we going with generative AI in terms of the future? Because right now we're still in, or we're just coming out of that POC bubble where everyone's just testing and poking, and we're coming to something realistic. What problems does productizing these POCs have? What does that entail? What problems does that give customers and businesses?
there's two parts to, or there's two potential answers to that question, and it's basically there's the good side and the bad side of it.
Yep.
And I think looking at the bad side, because I got a little bit of a story to go with that one. Generative AI makes it incredibly easy to do a lot of stuff, right? Last year when we were all talking, OpenAI and this and that, oh, look how easy it is for me to automate the generation of blog posts, right? I can crank out a blog post every day and post it to my LinkedIn and, all of that sort of stuff. And great, I've never got to write blogs ever again. Well, yes, you can absolutely do that. You can create a content machine and crank it out till the cows come home. You can write entire books. Are they great? No. Are they good? Sometimes, maybe, depending on the topic. But it's minutia. Now, there is the whole thing there about you build a blog populated with nothing but, ChatGPT generated or any LLM generated content that then gets scraped by the next round of LLMs, and there's a downward spiral happening there. But you can take that, as many steps forward as you want, right? So I ran some workshops last year on generating YouTube videos using generative AI, right? So you can use your LLM to, you give it a prompt, just like you would anything, and you can have it go away and generate the script for the video. You can then go, and use, text-to-speech engines to generate the voice. It can then go and generate the images. It can then, spin out a farm of Lambda functions to stitch all the images together, turn it into a video, use the YouTube API and upload it to YouTube. Voila, I've now got a fully automated YouTube channel. Again, is it great content? Nope. Is it good content? Nope. But I can crank it out. Like, how many videos do you want a day? 1, 100, 1,000, 10,000? How many channels do you want? Like, this is just like ad infinitum. And it's lowest common denominator stuff, right? So from that perspective, where are we heading? There is going to be more of that stuff. There is going to be more rubbish generated than ever before.
Matt, look at it now. YouTube, TikTok, all this Instagram, all these social media sites are now just basically have this automated vertical generation video content being put through. So the internet itself is going to come to a point where it's just going to be
noise,
filled with noise, and then we're teaching LLM to learn from that noise. So
this is what noise looks like.
Or do we have 4 teachers? What's going to happen here?
Right, like so from that perspective, like, and don't get me wrong, you could say social media hasn't been a great place for years, but that's a different conversation for a different group of people at a different time. But like, from that perspective, where are we heading? Not a nice place is the answer to that question. And I actually had a conversation. with numerous AWS people and other community builders last year about whether or not to run those workshops, because showing people how to weaponize, because effectively that's what you're doing, right? When you automate the whole process end to end, you're effectively weaponizing the tool. Whether or not showing people how to do that would be a responsible thing to do or not. Now, at the end of the day, people are going to know, people are going to do it one way or the other. So we decided, for the purposes of getting beyond the Gen AI is a chatbot conversation, it's a good workshop that you can sort of go through and see what's possible. The flip side, where are we going from a good perspective? At the moment, like as Bojan mentioned before, right, the coding assistants, right? They are great for the 80%, right? Because 80% of code we write, 80% of stuff I do as a consultant is not value add stuff, right? It is making the PowerPoint presentations, it's making the documentation, it's writing the code, and 80% of that stuff, like, it does not matter whether or not my tables are aligned perfectly. The value is in the specific content. But if I can automate all of that, wow, I was going to go there again. That less valuable stuff, away, right? That's a great place to be, because that means I'm not spending 80% of my time doing the little low value stuff. I'm spending 100% of my time working on the 20% that actually adds value. And what I like, where I see us heading is that 20% shrinking. It will never go away, right? The idea of, AI is going to steal my job and, all of that sort of stuff. If your job was the 80%, yeah, I'd be a little bit worried. It's probably not going to go away today, but yeah, that's the stuff that's going to go. Move up the stack, right? As we're all consultants, right? We know for a fact that AI is not taking our jobs anytime soon. There is too much ambiguity, too much,
Have you seen Devon? Oh, it's the Gen AI software engineer. Oh, it's wonderful. Oh, it was a lie.
Yeah.
That goes to show where we are in that process right now. And I think, Matt, like, I've got to agree with you there. Like, there are those two sides. The automating the way the 80%, should we still be digging in fields when it comes to farms using our hands? No, we went to shovels. We went to using a hoe attached to a horse. And then we eventually moved on to having these giant trucks.
Machines.
John Deere. But nonetheless, using these trucks to actually dig through, and we managed to expand that. So we took that 20% of what's most important, which was planting, growing, and then eventually, harvesting and feeding as the biggest priority. And we managed to scale that out. Same thing happens with developers. If you're a developer who knows how to utilize a code pair programmer to its best ability, you're no longer one developer, you're 1.5 at all times. And I think that's the change that's coming in now. For our industry, it's huge. Now imagine for everybody else. So if I'm going through and I have a very casual nature in the way that I both write and talk, but I need to be very formal because I'm approaching a different set of group of people, I can go type in how I'd usually type out, for example, a response, an email, an SOW, whatever it may be. And then basically ask a clever agent or a chatbot to say, hey, can you help me formalize this? I mean, Grammarly's been doing that for years. Even I believe Grammarly is getting to the point where they have their own AI. That's perfect. You're enhancing yourself. You effectively have this person, your own assistant in a sort of way, what they promised us with Siri and Google Assistant many, many years ago. They can help you get to a better you. I think there is a big argument to be had that the negatives no longer really outweigh the positives anymore. I think the initial fears were that, look at all those jobs, we're at this, we're at that. Every company, and I'm going to preface this, that with the content that I've read, most of the companies that have replaced people with Gen AI have quickly learned that it needed to go back to people. The case that I can remember clearly was in the States, where they replaced a mental health line with Gen AI. Took about 3 hours before I went on Twitter and Reddit, and then that company quickly had to hire back a bunch of people.
Yeah. Does the automation with things like code pair programming does it hinder people in some respects? Does it have the risk of hindering? For example, one of the theories I heard is that code pair programming makes average coders better, but good developers slower. Is that true?
I would say absolutely not. So studies have come out from some people. You wouldn't say that, it's creating their own studies from GitHub, where the GitHub has said that productivity went up. Quality of code didn't increase, but the speed at which you get to a deliverable product increased. So quality of code was dependent on what you wrote in the first place and what others wrote. So for example, what I saw was it was about a 25% increase in code delivery, but an 86% increase in documentation generation. So you find the filler to become a better developer. So we actually have and this is me shilling a little bit, so bear with me. We've got a GitHub meetup in Sydney, right? I run that. And we had a speaker there who was a junior software engineer. He's been in the industry for about 2 years. And a gentleman called Brody, works at Mantle as well. He spoke on his experience with Copilot. He never took Copilot as this thing that's going to tell me everything what to do and how to do it. He always took it as, I'm going to get a suggestion, and then I have to have the wherewithal to understand what I'm being suggested and make the best choice from that. Half the time, people don't know what they want. They'll Google, they'll search, they'll spend all this extra time. What if I basically get a suggestion that I can think of? So I think contextual awareness, as well as critical thinking, that is going to be a bigger demand, and that's going to separate out the developer who just sits on Stack Overflow most of the time, and the developer who actually spent their time understanding what they build and how to design it.
Absolutely. Like, I would say and again, like Mike touched on this in the last episode, right? It's a little bit of getting used to the tool, right? As you know, starting out as a developer, getting used to it, you're still getting your head around IntelliSense and the IDE doing things around you and all of that sort of stuff. So to have a co-pair programming or a coding assistant sort of jump in as well and go, hey, did you mean this or do you want this? Is like, you're not unused to that. So for it to do that is probably less of a jolting experience. Whereas if you've been playing this game for, 10, 15, 20 years, having something like that all of a sudden start just jumping at you going, here's a block of code. Would be jarring. And as a senior developer or a seasoned developer, it would take you some time to get used to that. But the flip side is, I don't care who you are, right, or where you are in your journey as a developer or an engineer or anything for that matter, you always will come across a situation where you need to raise your hand, tap somebody on the shoulder and go, can we go stand in front of a whiteboard for 5 minutes and nut this out? Because I need a second set of eyes, right? When you're starting off as a junior, that happens a lot, right? You need a lot of help. You need to, pair programming. You need somebody else it's another brain to jump off a lot. As you get higher up the stack, obviously that happens less and less frequently. Or the complexity of the problem increases, all right, before you need to get some assistance. You still need a second set of eyes. And a paired programmer, a coding assistant, call it what you will, is that second set of eyes. So even as, a 10x developer could absolutely and will absolutely benefit from this sort of stuff. It may not be every day. It may not be every line of code that they're benefiting from it. But the flip side or the bit that, when I talk to customers that I sort of remind them, and this is going to sound a little bit strange based on the comment I made at the beginning of the show, right? Something like Q Developer is $20 a month. Now, what are you paying your software developers? How many hours a month does the tool need to save them to justify a $20 investment? Now, I'm going to go out on a limb, again, Australia, so the numbers might be a little bit skewed, but in Australia, it's minutes a month, not hours that it needs to save them. It would be hard. You'd be hard fought to find a developer who does 168 or 100 however many hours in a month there are that won't benefit at least once from a coding assistant.
Mind you, these coding systems aren't just, I was taught on a public model and I'm going to figure out what to do. So Amazon Q for developers and Copilot is an example, right? Once you're at a company that's choosing to use the business features of them, which is to say, for example, with Amazon Q for developers, point me to your repos. I will learn the way in which your code is written. I will learn the way in which your documentation is written. So imagine the onboarding experience is a lot easier, for example, with function naming, test case creation, for example, modularity, documentation, when you have something that knows the code, that knows the smaller contextual specifics that aren't always remembered. For example, how should I do a comment, or how should I generate a README, or nonsense. But the sort of stuff that matters when you've got new people. I don't want to be replaced. I want people to be comfortable that they have something that can know the knowledge that I have that I shouldn't know in the first place. I don't have to be the person who knows where every comment means whatever it needs to mean, right? My point is that you can train these co-pair programmers in the same way a specialized LLM is trained, which these sort of are, more or less, to get you to good. So you don't have to be like, create this new Lambda function for me. You instead could be commenting things such as, generate a X for my new API based upon this repo, and it'll have the contextual awareness to help you out and build that. So speed of delivery always outpaces better execution. I mean, again, to use a really old example here, Betamax, VHS. Arguably one was better. It didn't win though, did it?
Making me feel old now.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say anything.
Oh dear. But yeah, and playing devil's advocate at that point, I've certainly been enjoying, Amazon Q developer and code pair programming use cases as well. A comment turns into a block of code, and then all you've got to do is debug it rather than write it from scratch. I do feel that they've definitely got a purpose, and they do help with productivity as well. What advice would you give to organizations that are looking to leverage Gen AI, or more to the point, productize Gen AI?
Find the problem before you find a solution. I said it before.
Yeah.
90% of the time, what companies are trying to do is try to be first. We have a very popular thing that's out in the market and be relevant to our industry. So what companies will try to do is, how do we bake Gen AI into it, right? It's basically going back to the days of where people had IoT on everything, or had the word smart, or even Apple's moniker of intelligence, right? If you have a product that requires search, baking in a AI-based search, go for it. Great. You have a solution to a problem that you have, or rather a feature improvement. Creating a Gen AI for the sake of saying you have it, maybe a marketing win, but there's a hype train that eventually runs out where you've spent money on a product that no longer delivers. So I'd say find a good problem to fix, and then see if AI is the fit for it.
There was a point there, and I lost my train of thought for a second. Finding the problem is the key piece of advice that everyone comes up with. Start with the problem, work your way back, the working backwards methodology. You've probably done these as well, with customers, the workshops. We did one earlier this year with an enterprise customer. And rather than introducing them to the technology and going to do something with it, we put 40 people in a room. Only about a quarter of those people were technical. We then had lawyers, we had HR, we had people with no technical skill whatsoever in an operations role, basically working teams, say, this is our problem. Okay, cool. Let's deep dive on that problem. Tell me something that irritates you at work right now. Using these workshops, these working backwards workshops, you're then able to hear what the real problems are rather than say, what can we use this for? And I thought it was very empowering for the teams as well, for them to not only basically put their problems out there on a whiteboard, but then see how easy it is to start solving that problem using some of these consumerized SaaS level products. As I mentioned earlier on the stack there, Amazon Q and for business and Q for Q developer. But then also allowing the slightly more technical people to look at something like Bedrock knowledge base and how easy that was to go and leverage as well. Start with the people, not with the technology.
100%. And honestly, those workshops that you mentioned, you can call them game days, you can call them, all their workshops, you can call whatever you like. Event storming is a great one that usually kind of gets to that point, right? The point is that just because we're technical doesn't mean we have all the problems to bring up and a solution to bring forward. It's usually the non-technical that find a use case for us to have a problem to fix. Better search, for example. And I know I'm bringing up the most common thing, but if I have something that's quicker than Google, you know for a fact I'll be using it. Google's constantly contending with itself and others to kind of get to that point. Same with shopping sites. If anything becomes quicker than Amazon to get me the right product to search for, I will surely use it. And with that sort of competition out there, that's always an ongoing problem. So people are trying to find if the techniques behind generative AI, so in the way that which a large language model educates itself on a particular set of data sets, if that's a good alternative to, for example, vector searching or specific search algorithms than the standard approach. Do we have to use Lucene or another Lucene-based search to get to the point? Or can we actually feed an LLM and get a better result? So the takeaway I have at the end of the day is just try not to drown yourself in the hype, focus on the problem.
And with the hype engine slowing down now, is what it seems, maybe we're going to see a lot less chatbots and a lot more real use cases, valuable use cases whether it be in medical, whether it be in science, whether it be in business, solving business problems.
I also think you're going to see the definition of a chatbot blur a little bit, because there's a lot of use cases. So again, without revealing too much of what we do internally, we've recently been working on a tool to help us. We're a consultancy, right? We do a lot of tenders, responses. Anybody who's ever done a tender response in any industry knows they're not exactly the world's most enjoyable things to have to do. And when you start doing a few of them, you got to go, give us an example of when you've gone and done this, rah, rah, rah. Well, cool. We know we can search for that sort of stuff. So we might search for the type of project, or we might search for a particular accreditation, or whatever the case may be. Take that document, pass it into a Gen AI tool of some description, have it interpret the tender response, go and fetch the information, search your database, search your database, get the answers, pull it back out. Is that a chatbot? Well, because technically I asked it a bunch of questions, it gave me a bunch of answers. It's just I gave them the questions in the form of a Word document or a PDF or something. So yes, it's kind of a chatbot. It's kind of not a chatbot. Now, again, would you use that as the RFP response? No, you wouldn't, right? But it gets you the answers that you can then go and craft and tweak and add your particular organization's value and flair on top of that, right? I see a lot more of those types of things sort of coming along. The one thing I would say is absolutely agree with the, problem, work backwards from the problem. But what I would not caution, but maybe just let people know, once you find one or two of these sorts of things that can provide value, you will find more. The customers that we've done this sort of work with, and again, internally as well, you turn around and go, hey, we had this problem. We came up with this tool, which now saves us, X amount of effort or X amount of time, or, enables us to move X times faster, whatever the case may be. Every single time we've done that, there's always been one or two people in the audience that turns around and goes, what about X, Y, Z? Could it do X? So we had one, we literally had one the other day. We were talking about the RFP tool. Somebody else has turned around and gone, could we scrape could we scrape vendors' websites to check ISO compliance and those sorts of things to work out which vendors do and don't have particular accreditations for our supply chain management? Well, the answer to that is yes, you could. All right. So you start building other ideas. And again, because you've got tools like Q. Is Q the answer to that sort of problem? Don't know. But what Q does do is it lets you very rapidly prototype what a solution to that might be. Because you've got the data, you scrape it, you can do your prompting, you can do all of the engineering in the back end and sort of see what it looks like, and then go, is this better than what we currently have? Is this actually a viable tool? Yay, nay, kill it. Actually, yes, it is a valuable tool, but it would be really cool if it was integrated with our existing thing. Okay, cool. Move it to Bedrock. Done. So there's a lot of that sort of stuff. But again, don't go looking for the problems. Let the problems come to you, and then see whether or not Gen AI is the right answer.
Good points. Very valid points. And at that point, I think it's time to wrap up. We are at the end of the hour nearly. I want to thank Bojan and Matthew for being on the sounding board today. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you for having me, as always.
Thanks.
You're always welcome. Always welcome. As I said, it's your second time here. So I really appreciate your inputs.
Thanks for having us. And look, bit of a shout out to you as well. These sort of community conversations can't happen without people putting in the time and effort. And we've all got families, we've all got lives to look forward to after work, but it's not easy kind of getting, the herding of the cats with a bunch of technologists together. So appreciate it, mate, honestly.
No, agreed 100%.
Well, thank you very much, guys. See you on the flip side.
Sweet.
And that concludes tonight's episode of The Sounding Board. Thank you very much, viewers, for tuning in. This will be recorded as well, which will be then redistributed for our other time zone people as well to watch. Just a reminder, if you want to get involved, no matter what time zone you're in, don't forget to click on the QR code over here. And if you don't like QR codes, we always have the get involved link as well, just down here. Fill out the form, tell us what's on your mind, and we'll bring it to the show. Other than that, good night, take care, and don't forget, have you tried explaining it to a rubber duck yet?